Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex, and today we got our third sneak peek with our second new character for this X-Men update. And as things take shape, it's starting to look more like this is going to be centered or entirely around and dictated by X-Men characters and possibly not featuring Sentry at all. So I wanted to update you guys that first, because originally in the Gambit update with the sneak peek for him, I did connect him to the Chinese post or the server kind of notification that we saw on Reddit about possibly seeing Sentry and Gambit. But it looks now like it's just X-Men. It's all X-Men, baby. It's all X from here on out. So we got Gambit, we got Magneto Tier 3 in uniform, and now the latest one is Kurt Wagner, aka Nightcrawler. So very exciting to get a character that's so beloved, and he is more of a B-list X-Men. He's definitely not among the first class of X-Men, but he is still extremely popular, and we've been wanting to get him in the game, and a lot of people have been cheering and hoping and crossing their fingers for Nightcrawler since the original X-Men came to the game over a year ago. So it's really nice to see Netmarble continue to push the X-Men side of our roster, and this does have a lot of additional pluses and bonuses to it. Additionally, I do want to say that I really hope that we do get some X-villains, because that is the one area where Netmarble and Future Fight kind of lags behind. We don't have any of the classic villains. There's no Sabretooth, there's no Toad, there's no Blob, there's no Omega Red, no Mr. Sinister. There's very, very few X-villains, and so I would love to see more, and you know, this update is as good as any for us to get those types of characters to kind of be the yin to a lot of the X-Men's yang that we already have, like the opposite of Wolverine and Sabretooth and so on and so forth. But focusing now on the sneak peek for Nightcrawler, I do have quite a few things to say about the character. Now, the Twitter post is not very informative. It just has the classic BAMF line, and if you don't know what that means, it does not mean badass motherfucker. If you have seen Pulp Fiction, if you follow Samuel L. Jackson, or you just exist on the internet, no, it actually is the sound that he makes when he teleports in the comics. So that's why it says BAMF when he teleports, and they draw that in the comics sometimes, and that's what Netmarble means. More importantly, however, we go over to Moberum and we have the following text. Greetings, agents. This is CM Friday, Marvel Future Fight. We chased down a mysterious figure, but whoever it was suddenly disappeared and left behind a note. They called me many names: a freak, a preacher, a monster, a demon, a trickster. How about you? What do you see? Now, you may read this as Nightcrawler talking to us, the fans, but it's also possible the Nightcrawler is talking to someone else. And then at the bottom it says, and this is probably the part that most people are going to be excited by, could this be related to the card thrower or someone else? Now, someone else, a lot of people have speculated on this already. They are using the word related to discuss the actual relatives, the family of Nightcrawler, aka more likely than not his mother and father. So if you guys don't know, Nightcrawler's mother is actually Mystique, and his father is Azazel. So if you've seen the X-Men movies, you've discovered some of that kind of discussed already, and you've seen those characters individually. I don't know if they actually discussed the kind of heritage of the character in the movies, but it's discussed in the comics. You can find it online, you can Google it, whatever. So, I mean, there's a small chance that that does mean Mystique, but I think it's unlikely. I think they're just using this as flavor text, and maybe they want to remind us about Gambit, or other characters that are coming to the game, possibly characters that he interacts with at the X-Mansion, perhaps, you know, other characters, including Gambit, that are coming later on, if this is going to be a multi-character update, which I really hope that it is, because I don't want just two characters. The thing that I wanted to also ask or point out to you guys is that they have called me many names, and most of these names are negative. A freak is pretty negative, demon is pretty negative, a trickster is kind of somewhat negative in the context of the X-Men and how they are seen by the general public, by humans and by people who don't like X-Men. So it's possible as well that what do you see could have some relation to the last sneak peek, which was Magneto, but it seemed as though he was being targeted, or he was being seen, looked at by a Sentinel. So it's possible again that this is referencing the Sentinels and how they see the X-Men. Now, I don't think Nightcrawler would be specifically talking to a Sentinel because it's kind of weird, but it could just be that play on sight and perception that we got from the last update where someone was scanning Eric Lencher, Magneto. So that is pretty interesting. Hopefully we will see some other really classic, iconic X-Men that have been hoped for in the game for a long time, like Iceman or Kitty Pryde. Of course, also the villains, the X-villains I think are most important. But now the more fun part. What is Nightcrawler going to play like, and what typing is he going to be? So first off, I think it's pretty straightforward. He's probably going to be a speed type. He's probably going to play similar to characters like Spider-Man or Arachnite, moving around a lot, lots of movement, lots of different kind of camera angles and skills. Not necessarily camera angles, but, you know, just lots of different angles to attack the enemy by. But I did collect these 3 characters here that I thought would most represent Nightcrawler. So I want to take them into some gameplay to show you guys, because I think it's quite interesting. And I think if you look closely at the character, once we see him in an actual mission in game, or we see, you know, some footage, we may actually be able to tell some of these characters' skills being kind of copied and pasted, or at least closely resembling something that Kurt has, that Nightcrawler has. So the character himself, Nightcrawler, has, let me turn the autoplay off. He has, you know, of course, the teleportation skills. He also has incredible acrobatic abilities, and he's very good with a sword. He's a good fencer. He also has a tail, which he can use, and hopefully he will be able to use in-game in some of his skills, which I think is really, really cool. And so they'll be able to hopefully tap into all those things. So for a character that teleports a lot, you could see a skill, for example, like this, where he teleports around, jumping through a bunch of different kind of smoke bursts, because he doesn't actually open up teleportation portals like someone, for example, Blink. He doesn't open up portals and jump through them. He is his own portal. And so, unlike America Chavez, who's kind of bouncing around through these stars, imagine the stars were just big puffs of smoke. And so he would just bounce through them, and, well, I think that's her only... No, her first skill also has the teleportation, and that would kind of be one way of representing his teleportation, and then it would just look different graphically. The next one that I think pretty closely resembles, this one is probably the closest resemblance to Nightcrawler, is, I believe it's his second skill. That one, no, not a second skill. Which one is it? Is it the third skill? Yeah, it's the third skill. That one really closely resembles not only the color palette and the scheme, but also just the fact that he vanishes and reappears and attacks you. I think 2 and 3 are both pretty great examples of something we can expect from a character like Nightcrawler. And honestly, just playing with Malekith right now, I really hope that Nightcrawler is just what Malekith should have been. A much better character who kind of bounces around and hits you, and kind of this dark magic-esque ability. Not that Nightcrawler has magic abilities, just that's what you kind of get the vibe from when you're playing with him, well, at least compared to Malekith. The third one, the final one, is actually Cull Obsidian, when you use his third skill to activate his shoulder pads, and then use his first and second skill. Here he just teleports around like a Dragon Ball Z character, and this is where I really think it doesn't work without the pauldrons activated, but with the pauldrons activated, it really looks to me like something that they could use for Nightcrawler, and he could just kind of poof around and you know, bounce around, hitting the enemy in the face for lots of damage, and having a bunch of kind of intermittent iframes. So that's all well and good. I'm just going to autoplay this while we continue talking about Nightcrawler. Additionally, I think that they could have some design philosophy where the character has some kind of interaction with iframes, because I think it's a possibility, and I think it's something that we should see more of as the game progresses. We still have very, very few characters who ignore iframes, so it'd be really nice to see Kurt kind of go into a teleportation when your character iframes and still be able to hit you. If he had a flat ignore iframe as part of his character's skills, I think that would be quite interesting, and it would make the character an interesting foil to a lot of these very hyper iframe reliant characters. So imagine essentially laser point strike, but on all of Nightcrawler's skills. Now, of course, that sounds super OP, and I don't mean to say that I want Nightcrawler to be the best character in the game. I just think that it is one way of interpreting his teleportation, not necessarily that that's what it means in the comics, but it is one way of applying him into the game where he could actually have some sort of impact, and he could subtly shift, or at least have some sort of play on the best characters in the game in the meta without disrupting it totally and completely. Because if we just get kind of a cookie cutter speed type, he may be good enough to use, you know, better than Domino, maybe about as good as Luna Snow or Spider-Man 2099, something like that. But he's just going to become, again, one of those garden variety characters that we have a lot of, with, you know, 169 characters up to now 171 minimum with the new update, that really don't have reason to stand out. So I really hope that Nightcrawler stands out. I hope that all of the X-Men stand out in one way or another. You know, when the original X-Men came out, they all had unique abilities or unique functions that made them all powerful. Beast had his fantastic leadership, Cyclops had the ignore iframe, and so on and so forth. Magneto had the tier 2 damage to human types, which we hadn't seen before. We know all about Jean Grey and Wolverine and what they brought to the game, and I really want this next batch of X-Men to bring back that feeling. And so, you know, if they're a little bit OP, that's okay, but just to bring about new skills or to bring about new mechanics that we can play with, or just existing mechanics but tuned to a higher level so that they're actually relevant and usable. Because as much as I like to mention Cyclops, for example, having laser point strike, he's just not strong enough on his own to use it, and so it kind of goes to waste on a character like Cyclops, and you really only see it used on a character like Nova, who has it on a super OP second skill that does crazy damage and essentially one-shots most heroes level 60, even when they're in iframe. Finally, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that I think the one thing, other than everything else that the community is really excited about, is this woman right here getting a uniform. Now, I've said it before in videos, and you guys have seen it all over, comments everywhere, YouTube, Twitch, Mobirum, Reddit, line chats, etc. Will Storm get a uniform? I have no idea. Do I hope she gets a uniform? You bet. I really am hoping that Aurora finally gets a uniform, and I hope that it makes her a badass, because she kind of deserves it. And if it makes her as good, if not better than Black Panther with his new uniform, that would be, I think, the expectation and the kind of best case scenario, and that would make the community the happiest. So let me know what you guys think of Nightcrawler. Let me know what you think of the characters that may be inspired by, or may inspire his skill design, because I think that's super exciting, and it's nice to see some parallels between different characters, but also how they're evolved upon, because we don't just want copies and pastes. Subscribe if you enjoy the content and you want to support me. Hit the bell if you don't want to miss any of my videos, and of course, if you like what you see, I hope to see you again tomorrow. Take care.